Welcome to Tired Mommy Revival. Hey mama, are you running on coffee fumes? Feeling like brain fog, fatigue, and anxiety are running the show? Do you wake up dreading the day ahead, already overwhelmed by the endless to-do list and unsure how you'll make it through? Do you long for the energy to enjoy motherhood and care for yourself, but feel stuck and unsure where to start? Let me remind you of something life-changing. You were created for more energy, more clarity, more joy. Hi, I'm Jerusha, certified holistic wellness coach, wife and mom to 2 wild boys and 1 baby girl in heaven. I know the exhaustion you're feeling because I've been there, barely making it through the day, relying on coffee and chocolate to survive, and wondering why nothing I tried ever made me feel better. Then, God stepped in and revealed a powerful truth. A woman's body is beautifully and uniquely designed to thrive. When we align with how God created us, we can boost our energy, bust through fatigue, and step into the vibrant, joy-filled life He has for us. Mama, I'm living proof that it's possible. These days, I wake up refreshed, nourish my body with intention, and navigate the chaos of motherhood with patience and peace. Most days. And I want to help you do the same. If you're ready to swap exhaustion for energy, brain fog for clarity, and guilt for grace, you're in the right place. Each week, we'll dive into practical strategies, faith-filled truths, and empowering tools to renew your health, body, soul, and spirit. Are you ready for this? Let's do it, mama. Welcome to part 4 of our God's Design for Food series. This has been such a powerful journey, and I hope that you are enjoying it too. From Eden's simplicity to manna in the wilderness to the hard truth about cravings. But today we step into a season of promise, the promised land, a land of abundance, a table of joy, a feast of purpose. Because food was never meant to just get us by. God's heart is revealed again and again in how He uses food to bless, gather, nourish, and remind us of who He is. If you've ever felt like healthy eating has to be restrictive, or that joy and food are at odds, this episode will help you see God's abundant provision in a new light. Let's start with something powerful. God made promises about food before the people ever harvested a single thing. He told the Israelites while they were still eating manna in the wilderness, while they were still walking in uncertainty, that they were headed to a land full of milk and honey. And not just honey, but a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, where you will eat food without scarcity and lack nothing. That's from Deuteronomy 8:8-9. Can we just sit with that for a minute? That is a picture of a rich, flavorful, antioxidant-packed abundance. God was preparing them for a life of nourishment, not restriction, fullness, not famine. And He wasn't just promising survival. He was calling them to bless the Lord for the goodness He had given them in Deuteronomy 8:10. Before a single harvest, God gave commands about sacrifices of grain, fruit, and oil because He was already preparing them to steward what hadn't yet come. The land would require cultivating, but the harvest would be His gift. So while they were in the wilderness, still eating manna, He's giving them these regulations for when you're in the promised land. This is what your sacrifices are going to look like. This is what your feasts are going to look like. Before they were ever experiencing it, He was speaking the abundant blessing over them, letting them know that there was more to come, that the manna was a temporary provision for the fullness that He had yet to pour out over them. When God brought the Israelites into the promised land, He didn't just provide food for survival. He gave them a calendar of celebration. Feasts were commanded. Not because God wanted religious ritual, but because he wanted to embed remembrance, rest, and rejoicing into their lives through the rhythm of food. Leviticus 23 6 to 8, speaking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it says, "You shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord. It is a statute forever. You shall do no ordinary work. It is a day of solemn rest." But that solemn rest wasn't solemn like we think. It was sacred, set apart, joyful. These weren't somber ceremonies. They were filled with songs, prayers, shared meals, and stories of deliverance passed from generation to generation. Take the feast of Passover and unleavened bread. It lasted a full week. Families gathered and told the story of the Exodus while eating lamb, bitter herbs, and flatbread, each with powerful meaning. The lamb symbolized salvation, but for the Israelites, it also celebrated a special meal. Just like we don't cook a full turkey all the time, we only do it on a special occasion for Thanksgiving. They didn't eat meat all the time. Meat was good for them, but in proportion to what they ate, it was very much considered a special or celebratory food. Next, we have the bitter herbs, which reminded them of the hardship of slavery. And interestingly, we now know that those also aid in gut and liver health. Next, we have the unleavened bread, which symbolized the swiftness of their deliverance and was a reminder that God brought them out of Egypt so quickly that they didn't have time to let the bread rise. And it was usually made with barley, which we now know supports heart health in a big way. Even the ingredients themselves reflect God's life-giving design. His instructions weren't just symbolic, they were restorative. This wasn't a quick dinner or an obligatory potluck. It was a sacred, week-long, immersive experience of eating with intention, with others, under the banner of God's goodness. Exodus 13:8 says, "And you shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt." The food was the stage for remembering God's power, and joy was part of the command. Now let's talk about the Feast of Tabernacles as another example. It was one of the most joyful feasts of all. It commemorated the time the Israelites spent in tents in the wilderness, and God commanded the people to live in tents for 7 days as a reminder of their journey. But here's the key. It wasn't a somber remembrance, it was a celebration of how far God had brought them. Leviticus 23:40 says, "You shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days." They rejoiced in freedom after captivity, provision after hunger, community after isolation, and faithfulness that carried them into abundance. And what did they do? They ate together, they worshiped, they rested, they rejoiced. Food became the tool God used to gather his people and point them back to him. Now, here's the truth that ties all of this together. God doesn't call us to eat in abundance alone. He calls us to eat in one, a state of rest. Cease all work was a repeated command during the feast. Number 2, to feast from a place of joy and gratitude. In the presence of the abundance of food, the command was, "You shall rejoice before the Lord." And number 3, feasting was to happen in community through shared meals, gathered families, and retelling his goodness. It was a form of praise to God in the presence of community. These elements were not optional, they were sacred. This is so different from how we eat in modern life. We often feast alone, either hiding in the pantry or maybe even eating on the go. Or we're distracted. We're scrolling our phones or rushing or multitasking. Or we're stressed. We're reaching for sugar, caffeine, or chips just to help us cope. But God's design is that food would bring people together, invite us to pause, recenter in gratitude, fill us with joy and not shame, and to be a holy reminder of his faithfulness. When you look at the feasts of Scripture, you see God's heart so clearly. He wants to feed you in a way that nourishes your soul, body, and relationships. Now, let's talk about what this looks like today. Our modern celebrations have drifted far from God's design. Summer barbecues are loaded with processed meats, sugary sauces, and carb-heavy sides. Thanksgiving meals that leave us overstuffed and exhausted, and a December calendar full of cookies, cocoa, and blood sugar crashes all month long in the name of joy. And here's the real twist. Most of our overindulgence doesn't even happen in community. It happens while we're driving on the car or sitting on the couch binging The Chosen, in the pantry while hiding from the kids, or while we're scrolling, multitasking, or mindlessly coping. But God's model was never food as a solo escape. It was food as an invitation to stop working, to gather, to remember, and to rejoice. Not every day was a feast, but when it was intentional, joyful worship. God gave us a rhythm for celebration so that indulgence had a place and it didn't become the default. And when we realize that it's becoming the default, that's when we need a heart check for our physical, mental, and spiritual health. Now, let's talk about something else we may wrestle with: modern health culture. Everywhere you look, you're told to cut it all out. No carbs, no dairy, no sugar, no beans, lentils, oats, nuts, potatoes, sweet potatoes. Even healthy foods are demonized. And suddenly, being healthy starts to sound like empty and restricted all the time. And deep down, you might start to wonder, is God like that too? Does he call me to health that's joyless, flavorless, void of satisfaction? The answer is absolutely not. God's design for our bodies is rooted in abundance. The promised land wasn't a keto, grain-free, macro-counted desert. It was overflowing with wheat, barley, olives, honey, milk, and grapes. God's health plan starts with good food from the earth, food that satisfies, heals, and points us back to him. And when we let his definition of abundance shape our celebrations, we begin to find healing, not just in our bodies, but in our relationship with food altogether. So, what if your next celebration reflected this kind of abundance? Instead of feeling bloated or guilty, what if you walked away from the table feeling satisfied, energized, connected to others, and grateful to God? That's what God intended. You don't need Pinterest perfection. You just need to shift the heart behind your celebration. Look to the Mediterranean. Think olives, figs, nuts, roasted veggies, grilled meats, and fresh herbs. Or build a charcuterie board with foods that reflect God's variety and goodness. Make it beautiful, nourishing, and joyful. When food is prepared with love, eaten with gratitude, and shared in community, it becomes an act of worship. So here's your heart check. Have you associated health with restriction when God designed it to be abundant? Are you indulging daily because of stress and missing out on true joy in the feast? Are your celebrations pointing you back to God or pulling you away from the rhythms he created? God's heart isn't that you live in denial or indulgence, but in rhythms of rest and rejoicing. Mama, you were made for a celebration, but even more than that, you were made for a God who celebrates you, a God who provides in every season and invites you to gather around the table and remember his goodness. The promised land was a place of abundance and purpose, and God still calls us to steward that kind of life today. In the meantime, if you need inspiration for healthy recipes, I want to invite you to go follow me on Pinterest under Chavah Wellness. That's CHAVAH Wellness. And I promise you'll find lots of awesome inspiration there for healthy meals that fuel you with the God-given food from the earth. Next week, we'll meet Daniel and learn how saying no to rich foods for the sake of honoring God led to radiant health, clarity, and favor. His story is a powerful example of how obedience with your food choices can open doors for both physical and spiritual breakthrough. And I promise you it's going to be powerful. But for now, let's rediscover the joy of eating well, with gratitude, with beauty, and with the people God gave us to love. Mama, I hope this episode blessed you and reminded you that you were beautifully and uniquely made to thrive. If today's conversation spoke to your heart, I'd love for you to take a moment to leave a rating and review. Not only does it encourage me, but it helps more tired mamas discover the hope, healing, and energy they've been searching for. You're not in this alone. Make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Together, we'll reclaim your energy, renew your health, and revive your spirit, one step at a time. Until next time, remember, you are beautifully designed by God to live with energy, clarity, and joy. You're not just surviving, Mama. You're stepping into the vibrant life you were created for. I'm cheering you on.